Hi guys, it's your girl Duana. Welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be drafting one of the most important things in pattern making, and that is a bodice block. A bodice block is just the foundation for every top, dress, or jacket that you will ever make. And the best part is you get to use your own measurements. So before we get started, you're gonna need a measuring tape to get these 8 measurements. The first measurement you're gonna need is your bust circumference. The second measurement you're gonna need is your waist circumference. The third measurement you're gonna need is your hip circumference. The fourth measurement you're gonna need is your high shoulder to waist front. And I have to emphasize high shoulder because there are 2 parts of your shoulder that is normally measured for patterns. There's the high shoulder is right next to the neck, and then the bottom shoulder. I think that the high shoulder is a better measurement because that helps us to get the very top of the bodice block. The 5th measurement that you're going to need is your waist to hip. The 6th measurement you're going to need is your shoulder to shoulder, and you can actually do that from the back. So you can do it from the front or you can do it from the back. I actually prefer the back. So from one end of the shoulder to the other end of the shoulder. The 7th measurement you're going to need is your apex to apex. So now this is just your nipple point to your nipple point. And that's it. And so make sure that you get this as accurate as possible or your darts are gonna be here or here. You want it to be as close to the accurate measurement as possible. And the 8th measurement, which is your last measurement that you need, is your shoulder to apex measurement. So this is a good time to pause, get your measurements, and then let's get started. First thing you're going to need is a standard ruler, and I really like this one because it includes the 1/16 inch markings. Alright, so we're going to start with a back bodice block. So I'm going to start by creating my center back line, and first measurement I'm going to need is my high shoulder point to apex measurement. For me, that is 12 inches. Next, I'm going to mark the waist point, and I'm going to use my high shoulder point to waist front measurement minus my high shoulder point to apex measurement. And that takes me to 5.5 inches. Next, I'm going to mark my hip point using my waist to hip measurement. And for me, that was 8.5 inches. So now I'm going to draw my shoulder line, and I'm going to use my shoulder to shoulder measurement divided by 2. And my measurement for that is 8.25 inches, so 8.25 inches. I would consider myself to have broad shoulders. I've actually seen most people do this at 8 inches. So just in case you are unsure about your measurement, I would go with 8 inches. So now we're going to create the neckline, and for this you want to go down 1 inch on the center back and 3 inches across on the shoulder line. And so now get out your French curve ruler, and you're going to create the curve of the neckline. So now we're going to draw the shoulder slope, and we're going to do that by dropping the shoulder line by 1 inch at the shoulder edge. So now connect those points to create the shoulder slope. Alright, so now go back to the bust point, and we're going to do the bust circumference divided by 4, and that's going to be our measurement for the bust line. My measurement is approximately 9 3/8, and this is when that ruler comes in handy with all those extra markings. So now we're going to do the waistline, and to do that we're going to take the waist circumference divided by 4, and then we're going to take that number and add 1 inch for the dart intake. So my measurement for the waist is a total of 8 3/4. So now we're going to do the hip line, and that is going to be the hip circumference divided by 4. And for me, that measurement comes out to 9 7/8. So now we're going to use a formula to calculate the chest width. And the formula is bust circumference divided by 6. Whatever that number is, you're going to add 1.5 to it. Hopefully you were able to calculate that earlier in the video. For me, that comes out to 7.75 inches. So now you're going to square that line, but you're going to extend it out 1.5 inches and then connect it to the center back line. So here's where you should have your 1.5 inch extension. So now we're going to find the midpoint of our vertical chest measurement, which was 7.75. And when we divide that by 2, we should get 3 7/8. So now you're going to shape the armhole using the midpoint of that vertical chest measurement. And you're going to create that curve using a French curve ruler. So now from the underarm all the way to the hip, we're going to connect the points. So now we're going to draw a line on the bust line to indicate the apex position. So all you're going to do is take your apex to apex measurement and divide it by 2. So my result for that is 4. So from that point, we're going to draft our waist dart. So we're going to start that by dropping 1 inch below the apex, and then we're going to end 2 inches above the hip. So now draw that line from point to point. So now from our waist point, we're going to measure out 1/2 inch on each side of the dart line. This is coming from the inch that we added earlier when we created the waistline. Now connect all the 4 points, and this will create your waist dart. This last part is optional, but as you know, bodies aren't sharp. So in order to shape the waist, I use a French curve ruler, or you can use a hip curve ruler, and just curve that waistline just a bit. And so now that is how we create a back bodice block. So to create the front bodice block, it is actually 90% identical. There's just a few things that are different when creating the front bodice block. So I'm going to go through it and stop at the points that are different. So I'm going to speed through these first steps. And so this line that I'm creating is the center front line now. That is the front bodice block. Before it was the center back line because it was the back bodice block. Now it is the center front line. So even creating the shoulder slope will be the exact same. The only difference is now where we are at the neckline. So for the front neckline, we're going down 3 inches on the center front and across 3 inches on the shoulder. And you're going to use your French curve ruler, and you're going to connect the dots to create that curve. So I'm just going to fast forward through this part because, again, it is identical to our back bodice block. We are still going to add our waist dart, so make sure you add that extra inch on your waistline. So now as we approach the armhole, we are going to make some changes. So now when we're finding our midpoint for our vertical chest line, we're actually going to take that midpoint and we're going to move the armhole midpoint inward 3/4 of an inch for the front armhole shaping. So now you're going to take your French curve ruler and you're going to connect the shoulder point to the midpoint of the armhole to the underarm. Okay, so I'm going to speed it up again. And again, everything is the same, including our waist dart. So now we're going to create our bust dart. This is something that is different from the back bodice. We don't have a bust in the back, so we don't put a bust dart in the back. So first we're going to find the midpoint of the side seam between the underarm and the waist point. So from the underarm to the waist point, that was roughly around 9 for me, and so half of that was about 4.5. So now you're going to start to draft the bust dart by drawing a line from that point to the apex. So like the waist dart, we want to stop the dart 1 inch before the apex. So now here's where it gets fun. Depending on your cup size, you're going to use a different dart intake. And so I use a C cup, and so I'm going to use 3/4 of an inch for each dart leg. And that will now be a total of 1.5 inches for my dart. So now that I have a 1.5 inch total dart on the side, I'm gonna need to make up for that length at the bottom. And so I'm going to add 1.5 inches to my side seam, and then I'm gonna reconnect the line to the center front waistline. And now if you want, you can shape the waist using a French curve ruler. And that's it for the front bodice block. So what I like to do when I'm done is to cut out my bodice blocks and just connect the different parts of it just to make sure that it all matches nicely. Remember that these blocks do not have seam allowances. I also like to check my dart, so when I fold in the dart, the side seams should match. And for the most part they do, which is perfect, and I'm done. Hope you enjoyed this video of how to create your front and back bodice block. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to comment. Don't forget to like, and I'll see you next time.